Greetings Exiles, I'm Gav. After covering the lore of all 10 acts in Path of Exile 1, I've been really diving into all the info on Path of Exile 2 before we finally get early access this December. During my research, I pulled out 5 features and changes that I don't hear discussed very often. These somehow made me even more excited to get my hands on Path of Exile 2. Getting right into the list, we're all familiar with the traditional health and mana pools from the first game, as well as other ARPGs. But in Path of Exile 2, GavrynGaming is adding a third limited resource called Spirit.
So Spirit is a new resource which is used for every permanent effect that you're just going to leave on your character the whole time. You no longer reserve your mana outside of probably some specialized mechanics or keystones or supports, and instead you're focusing on gaining as much Spirit as you can if you are wanting to stack permanent effects.
This new resource is GGG's solution to the mana pool in Path of Exile 1, mostly being used for reservation of auras, outside of a few niche archetypes. Now, the mana pool will strictly serve its intended purpose of being the limiting factor behind spamming active abilities. Spirit is used passively, and it's what we'll be reserving in Path of Exile 2. Rather than a percentage of the resource pool like PoE 1, each aura or otherwise simply uses a flat amount of your maximum Spirit pool. Reserving Spirit will allow us to activate persistent effects. Things like buffs and auras all run on Spirit, but that's not all. Spirit will also be used to manage your active summons, just as we were shown in the Witch gameplay video.
I want to try a different group of minions. I still have my trusty warriors, but there's a lot of different types to choose from, like brutes for stunning or ice mages for freezing, and most of them come with their own special abilities or command skills. For now, I'd like a couple of storm mages to shock enemies, a cleric to heal and revive my minions, and a bunch of reavers as well.
It's not directly confirmed by GGG, but I assume totems and ballistas, among other minions, will all utilize Spirit as well. But how do we increase our Spirit pool? Spirit is one of the many stats in Path of Exile 2 that we can receive permanent bonuses to by taking down bosses throughout the campaign. Scepters are the weapon base type tied to increasing your Spirit pool. I'm a really big fan of this new resource and leaving mana out of the equation for reservation. Spirit should really open up their creative design for future game editions, and finding different uses for it down the line while not touching mana. Let me know what you all think about Spirit. Next up is a feature that literally had me pogging out: dual specialization. As an avid World of Warcraft player since 2004, dual specialization being released in Wrath of the Lich King was unforgettable. In PoE 1, you rarely if ever swap to your other weapon. That slot is instead used for things like leveling up socketed gems during mapping, triggering Rampage at the start of the map, or other niche mechanics. In Path of Exile 2, however, weapon swap will be used for a completely different playstyle, all within the same character. Each weapon set that you have equipped will have its own passive skill tree. I found an ExileCon clip where they talked about this more in depth. I'll let Rory and Jonathan explain how they see this feature elevating gameplay.
There's also the dual specialization system, which was shown off during the keynote, where you can have effectively multiple trees that are slightly different from each other for multiple builds. And this has a huge number of uses, both for combining multiple elements, combining different weapons, which is great for the mechanics that are specific to each weapon type, as well as just deciding that you want to be extra tanky in your second spec, deciding that you want to focus your second specialization on the area of effect so that you can do something different with your main specialization. And it does have the cost of needing to find 2 great weapons to take full advantage of it. But when you do get the 2 weapons that work well together, it can provide a huge amount of customization to your character.
It sounds like the enemies in Path of Exile 2 will have inherent strengths and weaknesses to different elements or damage types. And now with the use of both weapon sets, you can prepare yourself to handle any situation you face in Rayclast. Weapon swapping also allows for aura swapping, and the auras activate automatically on the weapon swap, leaving you with both the skill tree tied to your other weapon as well as the auras and abilities that you've chosen for that weapon. It's literally 2 playstyles in one. And for all you shapeshifting fans out there, weapon swapping will also allow your character to fulfill your human form fantasy of melee, ranged, or spells, while also making your shapeshifting form have an alternate weapon swap and aura swap, as well as a passive tree swap, all to better augment your right to bear arms. I personally can't wait to toy around with my builds and different weapon combinations. I think it opens up a lot of room for build diversity and experimentation. Moving on to number 3, we're well aware of dodge and how it has no stamina bar. Dodge can be used infinitely and comes with a slight immunity frame to non-AoE attacks and projectiles. Path of Exile is following this trend of reactive combat, by giving shield wearers a new ability called Raise Shield. Granted by a new implicit found on mostly strength-based shields, Active Block allows us to raise our shield in front of us to block incoming hits. There are different shield abilities that automatically cause Raise Shield to occur, such as Resonating Shield. This ability is directional as well, meaning you need to be forward facing the hits and projectiles you want to block. Attacks from the sides and back of your character will not be blocked. And similarly to dodge, large telegraphed abilities and most AoE will not be blockable. By equipping a shield with the ability to Active Block, you gain an endurance bar. Every successful block depletes a portion of that endurance bar. If fully depleted, the shield character will be stunned out of their block and be left vulnerable. Passive block still does exist and will be displayed as a baseline chance to block. Active Block is just further leaning into Grinding Gear Games' move to more engaged moment-to-moment combat. All you shield fans out there, what are your thoughts on this addition to the game? Coming up next is some news that we received relatively recently, and I personally couldn't be happier about it. It's the big Flask rework. In a recent PC Gamer issue detailing their hands-on experience and insider interviews about Path of Exile 2, there was a section called Drink Deep and Descend. In this section, they go over a more recent development change that wasn't in any of the demos that people have played. I'm not even sure if this will be in early access right away, but the Flask system is getting a complete rework. Rather than the Path of Exile 1 system of having 5 flasks that you either automate via instilling or enkindling orbs, Path of Exile 2 will only have 1 health and mana flask, both with increased charges to accommodate this change. I really wasn't looking forward to having to hit 5 flasks as well as abilities while trying to do mechanics and move with WASD. So this is definitely a hype change for me, and I think better for the overall health of the game. And I think our wrists as well as new players alike will be thankful for this change. There was mention of a new trinket slot, much like the heist trinkets, but instead, these would modify our flasks to do different things like automatically use when frozen or bleeding, and perhaps these will replace the need for utility flasks and make us choose the effects we want on our health and mana potions via these trinkets. We'll have to wait and find out more. None of what was mentioned in this article has been publicly acknowledged or verified by Jonathan or Mark as far as I'm aware, but I expect we'll hear more about this change in the live stream on November 21st. Last but certainly not least, for all my fellow dad gamers out there, we will now be able to pause the game. In a Reddit post over a year ago, Jonathan dropped this information out of nowhere. This may be one of the more hidden features out of this list. He said, so something you can do is pause the game while playing solo, and the currently highlighted monster will remain highlighted, allowing us to read the mods. We can also mouse over the buffs and debuffs on ourselves and enemies to see what they all do, all while the game is paused and we're safe and sound. It's really similar to the screen pause during ultimatum encounters. Opening any screen-wide UI element such as the passive tree or otherwise will now automatically pause the game. Personally though, as someone with a 5-year-old, I'm constantly being pulled away from the computer. Having the ability to just pause in a moment's notice without losing anything will be insanely valuable. It can apparently be done during multiplayer as well, and anyone in the party can choose to unpause. Regardless of your situation, the need to pause the game could come at any moment. This is just overall a huge accessibility feature, and more quality of life like that is gladly welcomed. Well, that's my top 5 underrated features I found coming to Path of Exile 2. Had you already heard any or all of these? And which one are you most excited about? I couldn't be more stoked for the live stream reveal taking place November 21st at 3 p.m. EST. I'll see you all in Twitch chat participating in the hype. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe for weekly Path of Exile 2 videos, and I'll see you all in the next one. Farewell.